Well, good afternoon to all. I realize I'm starting a bit late, but again, that's why I did the preview last night, right? Anyways, I want to talk a bit of Toronto, and I know people are like, Toronto, but here's the thing. Toronto kind of last night, understanding that Jake Gardiner gets muscled off of a puck by Carl Soderberg. You guys know Soderberg's a pretty good two-way forward, and that he does tend to muscle guys off of pucks, right? Anyways, the Toronto fans rained down booze on Gardner. He was clearly shaken after the game. So upon hearing this, I thought, you know what? I want to take a look at the Leafs and see since Nylander came back, because that seems to be the dividing line. For me, anyways, it's the dividing line. Because that's when you take a team that was kind of cruising along near the top of the league and you plunk a top six forward in there. And you plunk a guy in there who didn't go to training camp, a guy who, yes, he'd been skating around, yes, he was in shape, but it's completely different from playing in game, and a guy who, let's be honest, really hasn't produced. And then I want to compare him to Gardner, and then I want to look at other players, because since we're at that point where Leaf fans will usually point their finger, and I know all hockey fans do. Vancouver, Pouliot. Before that, Edler. And of course, there have been fingers pointed at basically every member of every Canadian team at one point in time or another. It's kind of what Canadian media and Canadian hockey fans tend to kind of do. Anyways, if we look at their record since the return of Nylander, they're 8-7-2, which isn't great. However, they lost their first game when he came back 5-4 to Detroit in overtime. Then they lost to Boston 6-3. That was when panic set in. Then they beat Carolina 4-1. And that's where you get Nylander putting in 2 assists. Now, Gardner had 2 assists in the first game, 2 assists in the second, and 1 in the third. So he had 5 points in those 3 games. It's been a cooling off stage for Gardner since then, however. They lose 4-1 to Tampa. Neither player gets on the board. They lost 4-3 in overtime to Florida. No points for Nylander, of course. 2 assists for Gardner. Gardner gets an assist the next game where they beat New Jersey 7-2. 7-2 and still no points for Nylander. They win 6-1 over Florida. No points for either player. So they get 13 goals and Nylander gets a goose egg. The Rangers then came in and lost to Toronto 5-3. And there's an asterisk that I will get to. So Toronto at this point is 4-2-2 since Nylander joined the lineup. Not bad. Then they win in overtime over Detroit 5-4. Gardner gets an assist. They beat Columbus 4-2. Gardner gets an assist. They lose 4-0 to the Islanders, and this is where everybody starts to panic. Now, for me, I was alarmed at the loss 4-0 at home against the Islanders because it's kind of a big game and goose egg like that, and just I don't know, the effort has been lacking in some of these games, which dropped them to 6-3-2. But remember, they were 6-2-2 in the first 10 after Nylander comes back. So it's Nylander's not producing, but we're still winning games. Once that goes away, it becomes more of a stark focus. Now, they lost 4-3 to the Minnesota Wild. In that game, Nylander gets a goal, and of course he pulls the invisible monkey off his back and punts it into the crowd. The monkey seems to have done some kind of a boomerang shot where it went all the way around, and lands right back on his back because he hasn't had a point in the 5 games since the monkey kick. Gardner, meanwhile, went 4 games without a point, had an assist in the win over New Jersey, and that's been it for him. They beat Vancouver 5-0. Neither gets a point. They lose 4-0 to Nashville. Of course, neither of them get a point. They beat New Jersey 4-2. They lost 3-2 against Boston. Of course, last night they lost 6-3 versus the Colorado Avalanche. Now, where Toronto's at, you can look at Nylander and say, well, he's got 3 points in 17 games. It's all on him. I will say this, putting Nylander in a top 6 role and with the production he's put out has absolutely disrupted the team. It has. Gardner, 11 assists in the same 17 games. He's not getting goals, but Gardner's not out there to be a defensive stalwart. So if Gardner's coughing up the puck, he's supposed to have a Mark Mathot type playing with him that prevents those pucks from going in the net. So I'm not trying to make excuses for Gardner. Gardner's never going to win a Norris Trophy. I'm just saying he is flash and dash, and he probably shouldn't be playing as many minutes. Now, as a Bruins fan, we kind of have that with Torrey Krug as well. Krug defensively can be an absolute disaster, so you have to watch him, you have to watch his minutes, and some nights he plays more special teams, it seems, than anything else. Now, if you look at points over this same period, Marleau hasn't had a point in 9 games. Marleau seems to skate by and not get a lot of conversation about it. Hainsey has 3 assists in 17 games, so while we talk about Ron Hainsey, and he's doing just fine, 3 assists in 17 games. They're just not getting the production from the blue line outside of Riley. Morgan Riley has 4 goals, 13 assists, 17 points in the last 17 games. I apologize if any of these numbers are off at all because I went through and manually counted everything. Matthews, we were all talking about Austin Matthews. Oh, he's falling apart. He's got 5 goals, 14 assists, 19 points in his last 17 games. He's not getting the goals, but he's getting points. And when Matthews isn't scoring goals, he's still out there working hard, and he's very visible in game. He does a little bit of everything. Nazem Kadri, 1 goal, 9 assists in 17 games. Probably not good enough. And Nazem would admit that 1 goal in 17 games likely isn't good enough for him. This is a guy that you expect at least 20 goals out of, and that doesn't prorate out to 20 goals. He has 9 for the season, which kind of hides how poorly his numbers have been performing over the last 20 games. Dermott, I put Dermott up here because, again, it's that offense from the blue line that's been lacking at points. 1 goal, 6 assists, 7 points. And then there's the big picture thing, which was Freddie Anderson was out for quite a while. So the asterisk is Freddie's last game, which is against the Rangers, which was a 5-3 win. And then he comes back last night. That's the other asterisk. He's out December 22nd till January 14th. They went 4-4 while he was out. So they were 500 while he was out. Not bad. And again, and I would point to the Vegas Golden Knights on this. The Vegas Golden Knights, they lose Fleury, they lose Subban, they lose Dansk, they have Legacy. Here's the thing. Their record when Legacy was in net, not very good. But they stayed afloat. Toronto stayed afloat while both Anderson and Sparks were out. Sparks went out on December 29th, and the record without Sparks was 2-4. So definitely there was a fall there. That since he went out, that they've been 2-4. Goaltending has been part of the problem for them along this cold streak of theirs. Now here's the interesting thing: when they outshoot their opponents this year, they're 11-8. When they're outshot by their opponents, they're 15-5-2. Or big picture, they've outshot their opponents 19 times. They've been outshot 22 times. Now that doesn't add up to every game they've had, which means they've tied in shots with their opposition more than once. But it means that they're getting outshot more than they're outshooting the other team. This is a team built with total offense, amazing offense, but they're allowing too many shots. At home, it's even more so. They're outshot in the first period 255-222. Second period, they're outshot 276-234. Third period, they outshoot their opponents 255-234. But if you've been paying attention to my reviews, very often when a team outshoots the other team in the third, it's because they're behind. So that tells me Toronto may very well be getting a lot of shots in games where they're behind going into the third period. And comebacks, I believe they're 1-12 at home when they enter the third period behind in the game. Now, when they're away from home, they outshoot the opposition almost the whole way along. It's almost a mirror image. 249-222 or 224 in the first, 236-218 in the second, and in the third, they're outshot 238-216. Your final shots at home, 715 for, 769 against. Away from home, 708 for, 687 against. Toronto does not play as well at home as they do on the road. This has been a theme all year. I know that I talked about them struggling to score at home at one point, and there were some Leaf fans that got upset about that. And I don't say that just to try to throw shade at the Leafs or anything. I don't do that. I say it because that's what I see. Now, if we look at the contract status of everybody, this is where it gets really interesting. So we're looking where they're at right now, right? And Gardiner being booed, and I'm sure there are Leaf fans that are like, oh, we got to get rid of him. It's going to get interesting. Tavares is signed, and these are beyond this year. Now, Trevor Moore just signed an extension for 2 years beyond this one. Tavares 6 years, Nylander 5 years, Zaitsev 5 years. Zaitsev might be the one that makes Leaf fans nervous because based on his play as a defenseman, do you need to make an upgrade there, and is Zaitsev the guy that goes? Probably not, and we'll get into that. Riley has 3 more years left on his contract after this year. Kadri 3 more years. Anderson 2 more years. Marleau has another year. Hyman has 2. Brown, Dermott, Hall, and Gauthier have 1. So when you look at the guys who are expiring at the end of this year, this is where it gets really interesting. And I know Leaf fans get upset about this, but we have to look at this. Gardiner makes $4.05 million. He's UFA. Hainsey, $2.4 million. He's UFA. Lindholm has $925K on his contract. Currently, he's UFA. Marinson, $800K. He's UFA. Not a big deal. Marleau has 1 more year, meaning that'll free up some money when his expires. But for next year, it's going to get interesting. Your RFAs are Marner, Matthews, Kapanen, Ozhiganov, Johnsson, and Sparks. I would go as far as to say that of the guys on that list, Ozhiganov is the one who may go. But Gardiner, do you keep him? At $4 million, even though we're going to talk about how fans booed him and how Toronto fans routinely make him the whipping boy, and I get that he blew it in Game 7 against Boston, but he's also been a pretty solid performer at other times. I think we see that negative and we miss out on the positive. Gardiner could be a guy who could come back and haunt Toronto the same as Larry Murphy did, the same as Phil Kessel has. It's not just a matter of putting a guy out on the ice and just let him go. It's a matter of deploying him properly, having him with the right guys around him, and figuring out what'll make him thrive. And I don't know that Toronto has done that really, really well with Gardiner. Hainsey expiring at $2.4 million. Yeah, you can let him go. But then the question becomes, are guys like Rosen, Borgstrom, is Liljegren going to be ready? It becomes a very young blue line, and it's really hard to win with a very young and experienced blue line. Kapanen, Marner, Matthews, those guys are going to be expensive. Even over this last 17 games where things have been kind of crappy, Kapanen is still producing. Kasperi Kapanen has been a very solid performer throughout this. He's going to get paid. Jansson's probably going to make some decent money as well. Not huge raises. Sparks won't get a huge raise either, but it all adds up because right now, according to Cap Friendly, they have $56.275 million in cap spent for next year already. Now, if the cap goes to $83 million, which is the rumor, they have $26.8 million right now in cap space. So you sign Matthews and Marner, and we've talked about, let's just say the two of them cost you $22 million. That leaves you $4 million to replace Gardiner, Hainsey, Kapanen, Johnsson, if those guys go, or to sign them. So the math doesn't add up, and this is something I've been saying and a conversation that I had about the Nylander thing. Nylander's been promised he's not getting traded. And to me, it seems like Kyle Dubas is the kind of guy who will not trade a guy he's promised he won't trade. But it leaves Toronto in a really uncomfortable position. These numbers are ugly. This record over the last 17 is not Stanley Cup contender-ish either. Now, they have time to turn it around. And Toronto very well may be in an excellent position going into the playoffs. They may very well be the number 2 team in their division, but they're still going to have to fight to get past Tampa in a second-round matchup in all likelihood, should they escape the first round. And if they face Boston, there's no real assumption that they necessarily get past Boston. I think they could, but that's just my Boston fan nerves showing up. This is tricky, because then the question becomes, is this the year Toronto has to win? If it is, if they're going to have to not tear things down, and this is something I've been trying to say too since the whole Tavares signing, with that $11 million in cap going to Tavares, it means somebody else has to go. And it's probably going to be a blue liner, since the promise was Nylander, Marner, Matthews aren't going anywhere. So because all of the young forwards have been promised big paychecks and you guys are all sticking around, you're going to end up losing from the blue line, where the perception is the team is weaker. So I don't know how Toronto fixes this. I know if Freddie Anderson rounds back into Vezina-like form, that helps. Having Sparks there as a backup will help. I'm not trying to say anything really nasty and negative about Michael Hutchinson. Hutchinson went into a no-win situation and did well with it, but having a healthy Freddie Anderson who can put up a save percentage of around 930 would be a huge boon to the Toronto Maple Leafs' fortunes. But Nylander's kind of an anchor, weighing them down. And it's, and I know the effort's there, and I know he gets chances every game, but when that production's not there and he's getting those top 6 minutes, it hurts them because they had to break up lines to make room for him. They had to switch things around at a time when the team was doing pretty darn well without him. And it is one of those examples of why sometimes when you add that big name player to a lineup, it can cause things to fall apart. This is why when a big name gets hurt and you see a team does really, really well while they're out, people are like, oh, this is great. I can't wait till he gets back. They'll be unstoppable. Doesn't always work that way because you're messing up your chemistry on the line. Whatever line he's going on, he has now got 2 guys with him that were playing with somebody else and may have been playing very, very well. So we'll see what happens from here for Toronto. But again, they're kind of in a we have to win now situation because the cap's going to be very restrictive in the offseason. And I'm not really sure how they fix this. But again, healthy Freddie Anderson. Matthews pots a couple of goals to get the media off his back. That probably helps. Again, he's scoring at above a point a game. I think with Matthews, I'll say this. I think people expect more from Matthews than what he necessarily is. I think Matthews is a really excellent all-star forward, franchise guy, sure, but I don't put him in the same category as what McKinnon's doing in Colorado. Remember, it took a while for McKinnon to get to where he is right now too. So I think there's some impatience that's there, and I think there's probably some as well going. He's on his entry-level contract. If we can get a Stanley Cup while he's on that, we're better off than if we're paying him $12-13 million. It's going to get expensive this summer, and it's going to be interesting to see what Toronto does. So there you go. My opinion is it's not Jake Gardiner. It really isn't. And yes, he coughs up the puck to make it 3-2. Then they tied it at 3, and the goal after that wasn't his fault. So I know fans will focus on him. The other part of that, of course, is that Mike Babcock, if you make a really kind of a boneheaded move or if you get out-muscled on a puck like he did by Soderberg, Babcock is going to bench you. He's done it with every defenseman he's coached, as far as I know. He's a tough coach, but he's fair. And Gardiner will have every chance to redeem himself. And it's worthy of note that Gardiner's very popular in the Toronto locker room. And Dubas seems to really like the whole team chemistry and guys liking each other thing. So for that reason, maybe Gardiner sticks around. Maybe Gardiner gets $5 million plus, gets a 4 or 5 year deal. It'll be very interesting to see what happens this summer. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happen upon this video. I'll talk to you again soon.